Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Invitation to a Conversation. I'm Pamela Bailey. It's a beautiful sunny day in there, so you're going to see some light coming in from the window. So that won't interrupt our conversation. I hope everyone had a blessed week. My guest today is a returning guest, Kelly Mathis. He's going to give us some updates of the upcoming election next Tuesday. Good morning, Mr. Mathis. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Mrs. Bailey?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling better. If
All
we
right.
can get through, if we can get through this conversation without me coughing, we doing good.
All right.
All right. So, the first question I have for you is, how is the voting season coming along this year?
I think the voting season this year, especially early voting, is really coming along great. Um, the numbers have really increased from 2020. So I think that's a great sign that more people are now getting engaged in the voting process and early voting. However, of course, there always can be some improvements. But I do believe that this voting cycle, I think that the numbers are bearing out that there are more people who are actively voting this year.
Do you know of any changes that has been put in place or eliminated for voting this year? It's because of the large turnout we had the last time.
Uh, as you know, Governor Kemp did pass, and the Georgia Assembly did pass some new voting laws this coming voting cycle. And one of the laws that they changed was they increased early voting. On the surface, that does sound great. However, when you get between the weeds, you start to see that yes, they did expand the early voting. However, they did cut off some other things as it relates to early voting, like they cut off some weekend voting. The week prior, that's leading up to election day, they cut off that weekend voting, which was popular, especially among the black churches when the souls to the polls. However, they tried to scale that back when they got a lot of pushback from it. However, some of the same restrictions are still in place. They have decreased a lot of the drop boxes that were put in place in 2020. And what they did was they moved those drop boxes from the outside into the inside of the facility. And the only way that you can access those ballot boxes is when the actual facility is open, which
Oh,
is
wow.
which is going to be generally during business hours. So those are some of the restrictions that have been put in place, which I think would kind of limit some of the people's access to the polls. However, again, you got to read between the lines. One hand giveth, the other taketh away. So
Yes.
I think we have to kind of pay close attention to some of those laws. I think for me, the biggest one is allowing the Georgia Assembly to have more power over the election boards throughout the counties. And I think it really makes a direct impact to those large metro counties, which would be the Atlanta, Fulton County, DeKalb County, those types of counties, where if there's some discrepancies that they feel that the election officials of those particular counties are not on top of, then the Georgia Assembly has the power now to come in and have an election board that can come in and oversee that particular precinct's voting ballots. And I think to me that's another power grab, which is one of those new laws that they kind of go unnoticed. I know a lot of people had a lot to say about one of the other voting restrictions about not allowing people to give food and water to people who are waiting in those voting lines. But that is a small detail compared to the big power grab of allowing the Georgia Assembly, the Georgia legislatures to oversee a board election if they feel that there were some discrepancies in the voting process of that particular precinct. I think that's a major power grab. It's almost like, yeah, I'm going to officiate the game, but I'm also playing in the game as well. So if I don't like the results of it, then I'm going to go in and let you know that I don't like the results of it. So we need to uh, invalidate some of these different ballots, which is to me a major power grab that I think we need to pay close attention to.
Do you think by them putting the drop boxes inside the building
Hmm.
and and only being available, like you said, during the business hours,
Hmm.
so will we have less turnout for absentee ballots? I mean, because some people just, not unless other people can bring other people's absentee ballots, does that person have to bring them in person now, or can somebody else take them? And do you think that will drop the number of absentee ballots being sent in?
I mean, it can make a major impact on that because also included in that bill, one of the restrictions when it comes to those absentee ballots is that you also have to enclose either a photocopy of your ID, your driver's license, or some state approved ID to go along with that absentee ballot. So, to sit there and say that someone else can bring it, yeah, but they also have to ensure that there's a photocopy of that person's um, ID or state issued approved ID along with that. Also, when you're talking about being able to drop off those ballots, when you have those ballot boxes that are now inside the facility, and those business hours are closed after at 5 o'clock, that makes it difficult for those people who may have to work and they don't get off until later. They're not
Yes.
allowed to be able to drop those ballots into that box. So now they have to wait until that business is open again if they're able to do it. So that it can definitely limit the number of ballots that are being cast.
Mm. That's really a deterrent, you know, just something to stop the people from the absentee ballots only because of that overturned election, and we have to pay for what they did in that last election. It's crazy, but
Yes.
it's interesting. Um, how is the young voters turnout? Do you have any numbers of how the young voters turned out this time?
I do, and it's not good. Um,
Mm,
and that's what's crazy about that is that the 18 to 24 group is the largest one in the state as far as registered voters is concerned. However, they're not the largest number that's turning out. The largest number that's turning out, and no offense, is your age group, Mrs. Bailey, the 60 to 65, 55 to 60. That age group is one of the largest uh, groups that are voting right now in the early voting. And if you can see why, most of them are retirees or those who are retired who have the time to be able to go and cast those ballots, especially early. Right now, we're still struggling with the young voters. Um, I do believe that we really need to do a better job at trying to reach those voters, especially those first time voters, to get them to understand the power of voting and getting them engaged into the voting process. But right now, the numbers, when you look at statewide, those numbers are not good at all.
why do you think, has anybody asked the question, why has it um been lesser this time around opposed to the last time around? Why did the dump numbers, does anyone know why the numbers have dropped among the young voters?
I honestly, Ms. Bailey, I really don't know. I've had conversations with young voters before, and a lot of them say pretty much the same thing that where they don't see how this directly impacts them. And so when you have that type of mentality as it relates to voting, then it's going to make it difficult for us to be able to really engage them into the voting process. Because if they have in their minds that, yeah, they're going to do what they want to do anyway, it's not affecting me in any type of way, then what other alternative do you have to try to get them to see how the voting matters? And so right now we're still fighting that battle on getting them engaged into that voting process and then totally understanding how it all works. But right now we just don't have the silver bullet to be able to penetrate them for them to get to see the importance of it.
Do you think that it's because it's a local election opposed to a presidential election that the young folks are not turning out?
I mean, that to be honest with you, that could be another big um, thing that allows them to understand the importance of it. I think because when you look at a national election with a presidential election, you typically see a lot of commercials being run, a lot of commercials being run throughout, your regular programming. So they probably only see the significance of the presidential election. So that's another good point. However, I really think we need to press forward with how these local elections are more beneficial to them as opposed to just that presidential election. But I can definitely see where that could probably be one of the reasons why, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Very good. How is the African American turnout this time around in our local elections?
It's not as good as I thought it should be. It is
Mm-hmm.
better than it was in 2020. Again, that voting block that's a large voting block, especially with the black voters, is that 60 to 65 age group. We're still struggling very, very mightily with that 18 to 24 and that young group. I'm a little disappointed in my age group between that 45 to 50 and 40 to 45. I thought it would be a little bit higher. Um, Actually, I had spoken to a political director for Ms. Abrams on yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that they were not as concerned with Glenn County in that regard because they normally say that our numbers pick up on election day. So I think right now they're kind of just gambling and betting on election day that our turnout will be much more as far as the African American vote. And so I think I will have more of a good, snapshot of where we are after election day.
Okay. How do you think the debate went between Warnock and Walker? Yeah, you can laugh.
Well, how much time we got? Okay. Whew,
What was some of the things that stood out to you?
besides the badge, um,
Yeah, yeah.
I'll say this. I'll say this in all seriousness. I really think that I think I I think Warnock could have done a better job of kind of being a little bit more forceful. I think he did not want to kind of go into the mud with Walker. And if you've noticed, with a lot of the Republican candidates, they are utilizing the Democrats, and all they're doing is trying to attach any Democrat to President Biden because they feel that President Biden's approval ratings are low. So they are tying any Democrat to him, especially as it relates to the economy and with the inflation. But I didn't really hear any policy changes that Walker would actually try to implement.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of just kept tying Warnock to Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that Warnock was trying to relay to people, he kept tying them to Biden. I don't know if that's going to be a great playbook, but that's what I took from that debate. He was just really tying anything with President Biden to Warnock and saying that Warnock voted with him with everything that he's done, which is causing the inflation, which is not the case. But I really didn't see Walker really uh, voice any type of real serious policy change or any new policy legislation.
Right. And as you said, he didn't have any answers for any of those questions. He always put it back into Biden's court to make him. And like you said, I don't think Warnock was as strong this time. I don't know if it's because he's the incumbent and he didn't have to do as much
Mhm.
and to kind of lay out what has been put in place or what he's been working on. But it was kind of a yeah, whatever you did with Biden, that's what it was. That was
Right.
his answer to everything. Yeah.
And it was. And I think that that honestly Warnock could have pressed more. Not so much about whatever Walker's personal beliefs are or whatever is going with him personally. I
Mm-hmm.
really think he should have pushed him more as it relates to the policies and
Mm-hmm.
what Walker was really looking at trying to do. I
Mm-hmm.
feel that Walker is definitely going to be a rubber stamp to anything that Senator McConnell wants to do, and I think they know that. They know that they're going to always have his vote on anything that they want to do, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't really think that Walker really had any kind of forethought of what type of policies that he would like to see or what type of legislation that he could try to alter to try to make things better. I don't really think he had any plan in that, which I think Warnock could have really pressed more on. I really wished he would have.
He and as you were saying that, I was thinking like Warnock could have said, "Well, this is my agenda. This is what I've done. What would you do different?" What is your agenda going forward? I would keep asking him that. This is what I did. This is what we're working on. So what can you do differently, and what can you bring to the table?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Now, I was going to also add to that. You know, even with the situation about abortion, I mean, he could have really pressed more on women's rights and things like that, and see where Walker really stood on that. Not
Mm-hmm.
so much engaging in Walker with his own personal situations with that, but just where do you stand with that, um,
Mm-hmm.
and see what he had to say about that. Because one thing about it, you can't just say that this is what I'm for, and in your own life you're doing something different. And so I don't know if Warnock's camp was thinking about, let's not get into the weeds with all of that. Let's just kind of stick to, being, professional and things of that nature. And I get it, but to some degree you got to kind of push back. And I really
Mm-hmm.
think that I really wish Warnock would have done that a little more. I think it
Mm-hmm.
would have served him better. I think everybody's pretty much kind of baked into who they want to vote for anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I think Warnock really should have been talking more to the independent voters,
Mm-hmm.
because the Republican voters are going to vote for Walker regardless. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
That's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But I really would think that his target audience should have been more the independent voters.
Mm-hmm. And now that you touched on the abortion law,
Hmm.
I've been really thinking these last couple of weeks,
Hmm.
what's really the agenda for them to bring abortion up? And my thought is this, the conversation around the globe is that African Americans and the brown people will one day be the majority,
Right.
and
2035 or 2045.
yeah, and the other race will be the minority. And I'm wondering, this is just my thought, and this is just my thought, and I'm thinking, are they trying to get ahead of the scale to try to um, increase the population
Oh, absolutely. I think
of that race? And the other reason, and it's a twofold, and the other reason is that women are growing so much in the workforce,
right,
just taking over corporations and companies,
right,
that if they become pregnant, they're going to have to make choices of whether they're going to stay in that career choice,
right,
be a stay-at-home mother, or
right.
not have children at all. And and if you're going to charge women, you need to charge the men who are impregnating these women, because they can't do it by themselves.
That's true. That's true. I think you touched on a lot of points there that are pretty valid as it relates to this abortion stance. And I know that there is probably a big fear of being in the minority that's coming forward. And so you're trying to utilize anything possible in order to eliminate that. I also believe that that's why a lot of the policies that are now starting to be implemented is in order to secure that. Just in case it doesn't work for us to increase our population, we're going to allow ourselves to remain in power. A lot of this right now, to me, feels like just a major power grab, and this fear of being able to be losing that power. So what we are trying to do is we're going to try to increase our population. If that doesn't work, then we're going to try to increase our power through legislation and through laws. And that way we will secure power regardless of what the population is. We're going to be the ones that's going to make the laws and make the rules of how we're going to govern it. So that abortion issue is one of those issues that has a lot of layers to it. If you noticed, since the Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade, if you notice, you don't hear many Republicans tout what they
Mhm.
accomplished with that.
That's
Before
right.
that came out, they were talking about, and Georgia was one of the first states that had those very strict restrictions as it relates to abortion. But then I think they saw the backlash after that court hearing, and you notice you don't hear them talking about that anymore.
Mm-mm.
They
Mm-mm.
stand away from that. And I
Mhm.
think that that was an opening that I really believe that Democrats should have seized on and pounced on. That was a gift that was given just about the Supreme Court. And I
Mhm.
think they kind of whiffed on that. Not so much just talking about abortion, but just talking about women's rights and really
Mhm.
appealing to women as it relates to that, because the women is a growing demographic. So I really think that they didn't seize on that opportunity enough to try to really sway women to say, look, if you don't allow us to get empowered, and these things are going to take place. This is just the beginning. So I really think they have seized on that, but they didn't. I guess they know better than I would. So I'll let them see. We'll see how those results turn out.
And sometimes in the near future, if they're going to keep having this conversation or try to pass a law on it, I think that they really should dig down into the hidden agenda of what they think. I mean, why is this out here again, and what is your agenda?
Right.
That was just my opinion, but I think that has a lot to do with it, because they don't do anything. They don't do nothing like that for nothing, for no hidden agenda behind it.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
There's always a hidden agenda behind anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if we really dig down deep again, I think that one of the things that I would definitely give, if I want to give the Republicans any credit on, the one thing I give them a credit on is the narratives that they push and the narratives that they
Mm-hmm.
put forward. I mean, they always make things seem as reasonable. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. This is what we're trying to do. But then when you look under the undercurrent of it, then you start to see the nuts and bolts of the reason why they're pushing forth the policies that they're pushing forth, especially
Mm-hmm.
new voting restrictions. It
Mm-hmm.
sounds reasonable. Hey, we are expanding early voting, but then look at all the other things that you're taking away. When you look at,
Exactly.
you got to really look at expanding that so you can have a wider electorate to people who want to engage in it. You don't want to
That's
restrict,
right.
you want to expand it. So I think we have to really take the time to really look at the motives behind why they're doing a lot of the things that they're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, in our state, a lot of the laws that they pass as it relates to voting are really to target those metro areas and who are
Mm-hmm.
in those metro areas.
Yes.
We
Yes. Yes.
so if we really want to look at it, we can look at these voting laws as to say that, hey, what about these little small counties that are run by other people? Are you looking at those counties? No, you're looking at the metro counties.
Yes.
So when you're looking at those metro counties, who is that directly going to impact? So they're not trying to say that, hey, we're not trying to allow you to vote. We just want to be able to shave off enough votes.
Yeah. Just enough. That's right. Just enough.
So
Yes.
to be vigilant about, our purpose. And I think that right now, I think for the most part, I think we have been. That's why I think the numbers that increase as it relates to early voting. And I think that we are starting to see that, hey, we need to take advantage of all of the things that we can do right now before they try to, restrict us even more.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about the Kemp and Abrams debate?
Oh, now we get somewhere. That was that that was a very intense debate, both of
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that Abrams did a great job of really highlighting a lot of the things that Kemp had been trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you notice, Kemp really could not put forth things that he has touted that were really good. I know he wanted to tout the fact that we have a very low unemployment rate, which we do.
Mm-hmm.
However, he didn't talk about the wage disparity within all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Talked a lot about, trying to make things safe. Now that leads me to this, and I'm pretty sure we'll get into it. So I'll go ahead and say it. If you notice, most Republicans love to tout public safety and law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And they love to do that because they are looking at law enforcement as a safety net. So
Mm-hmm.
they are very good on imagery and they are very good on optics. When you look at a lot of the commercials that a lot of the Republicans run when they talk about law enforcement, what are some of the images that they show? They show a lot of the protests, but they only
Mm-hmm.
show protests as it relates to the George Floyd situation and things like that. But they don't show any of the protests as it relates to the insurrection. So are
Right.
you saying that the insurrection was a crime and that the protests that we were when we were talking about George Floyd and those different types of things, are you saying that those were criminal? So it's the unsaid imageries and the unsaid optics that they like to put forth. And, they definitely like to seize on the defund the police, which, in my opinion, I really think that the Democrats didn't do themselves much service when they talked about that. I think they should have expounded on that more and not allow the Republicans to take that and create this narrative because that's one of the things that Kemp tried to do with Stacey, Miss
Mm-hmm.
Abrams, is to paint her anti law enforcement.
Right.
one of the things that the Republicans use as their playbook to show that Democrats are anti-law enforcement. They don't care for law and order. They don't care about laws and things of that. And that's not what it is. I think
No.
that they all care about law enforcement. We all do. We all care about public safety. But at the same time, just like in any other occupation, that you have to have a level of accountability. And I think that that is what she was trying to put forth, is that, yes, we need law enforcement. We need to have public safety. But at the same time, we also need to have accountability with the things that we do. There's not any other profession where you can't do certain things and not be held accountable for it.
Mm-hmm.
School system with teachers, if teachers are doing something that they're not supposed to do, they're gonna be held accountable for it. But
And the thing about it is the way the police have been policing, like in the George Floyd case. They think that they don't need to be accountable. They think because they are public safety servants that if this is what they have to do, to get some order or to take somebody down, this is what they have to do, and that's where the disagreement is, because we're not for that. Get rid
right,
of it and be accountable, and and charge them and have that worldwide database so they won't go from place to place and get another job after something happens in one state.
right.
So
And I think Ms. Abrams did a great job of really highlighting that when she talked.
mhm,
It was really trying to push her very hard on that. And
mhm,
again, her whole thing was that, look, yes, she respects law enforcement. She
mhm.
no ill feeling towards law enforcement. However, she felt that they also need to have a level of accountability as well.
Of how they enforce the law, yes.
Exactly. And the way that they do their community policing. So
Mhm,
I think that Kemp really was trying to paint her in that manner.
mhm.
Out at how many county sheriffs here support him and all of that. And she made the comment that she's not part of the good old boy system, so
Right.
you may not have all of the endorsements of them, but I don't believe that she's out to get law enforcement, and I think that that is
Mhm,
the picture, and that's the portrait that's being portrayed by most Democrats, is that they are going to be out to get law enforcement, and I don't really believe that that's the case. Again, I do believe that just as like anything else, everybody needs to have a level of accountability, and that's all that she was trying to relay in her debates.
mhm. What do you think about that? late the late payment of those 350 to get the young, because see, now we already talked about the young
Kim
generation
cards,
coming in. Huh?
the Kim cards,
Yeah, we already talked about the young voters not coming out, so I guess he
right?
figured if he give out enough $350, you know they gonna get their vote. But we know how they are. Listen, you can
Correct.
give us, but that don't mean we still gonna vote for you.
Fact. Facts. We'll take the money now, but that don't
Yeah,
mean that we're gonna pull that. We're gonna hit that thing in the ballot box.
yeah.
I think it was kind of sloppily rolled out, and I think it didn't pan out the way he thought it was going to.
Mhm.
Um, because if that was something that you were going to do, then you could have done it a better job at that. That's one of the things that I think that Ms. Abrams did a great job. Is that the state of Georgia has a surplus, a billion dollar
Six billion, yes. Mhm.
surplus. And those types of things could have been utilized a lot better than the way that he did it. And it goes to show you just where the priorities lie and where they lay at. If you were able to do that, then that tells me you were able to do a whole lot more than you did. So I think we need to keep that in the forefront. We can't just look at the fact that, oh man, we got an easy $350, but not knowing that we have a surplus. So if we have the surplus, then that means that we should have been able to get a lot more. I think that there should have been more programs that would have been able to help and benefit others, especially when you talk about housing. There could have been a lot more that could have been done to for teachers. That you appreciate the teacher so much, then you could have really increased the teacher pay. You could have done
Mhm.
a lot more as it relates to the infrastructure in the state of Georgia. You could have done a lot more as it relates to expanding Medicaid so that a lot of hospitals, especially in those rural areas, would not have to close. And now those people have
Mhm.
to travel like 20 to 30 miles to go to their nearest hospital. So if you're going to tout that $350 for those KIP cards and have a $6 billion surplus, then that means that you could have done a lot more than you said you did.
And I think that was just a last minute out the hat thing because of the way it came out. It was so
It was
sloppy
That
half online, half this way, half that way. So it wasn't no thought put into it. It was just a quick fix that he thought that he could put out in the last minute.
same,
Yes.
it's the same thing that the former president did. So
Mm-hmm.
if you pay attention, it's the same playbook.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Same thing in Florida. So
And
it's the playbook.
what was one of the things that stood out with you yesterday with Ms. Abrams in Brunswick? I knew about one hospital being shut down. I
Right.
did not realize it was five others. And with a 6 billion surplus, we could just sure enough renovate it or help expand or fix those hospitals.
I think that to me stood out the most, especially when he touts about having this major surplus.
Mm-hmm.
Because keep in mind, we could have expanded Medicaid years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And expanding Medicaid would have allowed those hospitals to remain open because they would have gotten money from the federal government for a lot of those people who were coming into those hospitals who may not have had insurance. So you're talking about millions of dollars that could have been paid to those hospitals that could have kept them open and kept them functional. But yet, you are not wanting to expand Medicaid and saying that we have this care and we have peach care and we have all those other types of insurance, medical insurance, but Medicaid is something that everybody has benefited from. I haven't heard anybody yet say they don't want their Medicaid.
Okay.
And I have not seen any doctor or any other hospital turn folks away who have Medicaid. So when you have a situation where you have this surplus that you tout, yet you're not wanting to give it to the people who need it the most, that's
Mm-hmm.
a major disservice. But
Mm-hmm.
if tax breaks and tax cuts to a lot of these corporations and all of that, which directly doesn't benefit the people who need it the most. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the fact you want to tout the money, but yet you don't want to give the money to the people who need it. To me, that's a service. And I don't think that he did a good job of that.
Mhm. And one of the things being in a certain age bracket right now, I'm meeting a lot of people in my age group,
Yes.
and they just, and it's so heartfelt sometimes to see that they worked 30 and 40 years in a certain career.
Yes.
And then when they retire, they still don't have enough money to live comfortably and
Right.
do what they need to do. And a
Right.
lot of people think that's just because you say you retired that you have all this money
That's true.
that you can live comfortably. But
Right.
there's a lot of people of a certain age who still have to decide. It is not just the middle age or the young generation that has to decide whether they're going to pay a bill or buy groceries. There
Right.
are a lot of seniors out here, because they always have that window of how much you can make a month in order to qualify to have Medicare and Medicaid. So
Right.
I'm learning a lot about that right now. And it's so heartfelt that we have to see them go without and they're not understanding their needs and they're not being looked at. And that is one of, if you look at other cultures like Central America and the Asians, they are highly guarded to their grandparents and parents when they get to a certain age more than they do their spouse or anything. And so we have to do better at looking at our seniors here in America and make sure that they don't fall short of living comfortably after they worked in this world, for so long, taking care
Right.
of other people and doing their job.
Well, you got to also let's add this in too, Miss Bailey. With those people of that age, they have a lot of medical issues. So when
Mm,
someone who's retired who may have some medical issues, now they're having to pay for prescription drugs, which
mhm,
there's that's astronomical. So now they're having to decide whether or not I need to pay for this insulin or pay for this um my treatment, as
mhm,
opposed to able to afford to pay for the roof over my head. So
mhm,
I don't want to be outside, but yet I got my insulin. That doesn't serve a good purpose. So nine
mhm,
times out of 10, people are going to look at what's going to be more beneficial for me. I need to have
mhm,
a roof over my head. So when you're talking about those same seniors that you just described, and they're having to pay for, a lot of medical bills and things of that nature, and they're not paid so much because they're on a fixed income. Again, you talk about this surplus, but
mhm,
giving it to the people who need it the most. And to me,
mhm.
that's again a major disservice because those people need that money the most. They've worked all these years, they put in their time, they've done the
Mhm.
that is necessary that you're supposed to do, and here they are not able to enjoy, the years that they've put in. They're not able to enjoy it because now they're having to decide on what's more important: me getting the medication that I need, or me paying for my rent or mortgage or whatever it is that I need to do in order to have a roof over my head and to pay for food on the table. So we need to do a better job of taking care of our seniors in that regard.
And one of the things is when you look at your pay stub, you see that you're always paying into Medicare, Medicaid, and all like that. But when you get 65, you are not all qualified if you make a certain amount to get Medicaid. But Medicare, you pay throughout your paycheck also. But then when you get 65, they take out $170 um, to pay for your Medicare A and B. And some people, that's their only income. So
Exactly.
if you're used to having this amount, like say you got it at 62 and then you 65, and all of a sudden, if you don't understand, you got a whole 100, and it might not be a lot to some people, $170 taken out your check.
Right.
You know what
Right.
I'm saying? That puts you back in a tight budget all over again. Now you gotta, how can you budget that all over again? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so we have to look at be an advocate and look at people of a certain age. Yes.
Right. Yes, we definitely do. I mean, you think
Yeah.
about it. You look at the workforce and you see, people of that age for back into the workforce because
Hmm.
the number of hours that they can work. Because if they work, over those hours, then they disqualified to get some of the benefits that they were supposed to get. So it's a catch 22. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
that's fair.
you see a lot of them walking slow, limping, because like you just said, they have to do a certain amount more time in order to get a lifetime of medical assistance or
Right.
insurance or whatever. And it's terrible, um and I'm seeing it every day. Yeah. Yeah, so we have to do something. We take care of the young folks. The young folks, I say it all the time, the young folks are being taken care of as long as they have children, but as soon as your child is 18 and you are an empty nester, and if you're not under a certain income,
Right.
it's all over. you know.
And that's why you see the big wage disparity in the haves and the have-nots. You don't
Hmm.
middle ground anymore because just like you just said, if you make too much, you don't qualify for these particular benefits. You just
Hmm.
make just enough, and you still don't have enough to afford some of the luxuries that anyone else would have. So you don't have that middle ground anymore. And so when you have this big wage disparity, then that's where you're going to create that wealth gap between those haves and those who have not. And unfortunately,
Hmm.
especially for those who are in their retirement age, they're in the have-nots because
Hmm.
they have the income coming in anymore. They don't have the income as it relates to the benefits that they're afforded because of their age. So now they're in that category of I just don't have enough to make ends meet. So now I'm trying to go work, but I can't work that many hours. I can't work a full hour load because if I do, then they'll disqualify me for the benefits that I do get.
Hmm.
So again, I don't like the fact that we are talking about having all of this surplus and we're not utilizing it to the fullest potential.
Hmm. Well, thank you, Mr. Mathis. I'm looking forward to election day next Tuesday.
Yeah.
M- Maybe one day it will be a federal holiday and everybody will be off and everybody can get out there and vote. We need to
Yes.
get that on the ballot.
Yes. I think we talked about that the last time.
Hmm.
We think that should be a national holiday, and I mean, I do believe so because when you look at those individuals who could definitely take advantage of that, those are your hourly shift workers. So they
Hmm.
are time getting off work to be able to utilize the early voting time. Um,
Hmm.
and if you are those one of those workers who just can't get off because you work a certain number of hours a week or you work a certain shift, that's going to be difficult for you to do. And
Hmm.
out of 10, depending on what type of a supervisor or a manager that you have, they may not let you off to go and do that, even though
Right.
it's duty. So I do believe that they should make that a national holiday. But again, we got to get the right people in those positions in order to pass that type of legislation to make that happen.
Yes, yes. And before we end, I just thought of that incident. Did you hear about that incident in Albany? Was it in Albany, Georgia, where the mail truck caught on fire? The whole truck caught on fire, and they had absentee ballots in there.
Oh wow, no, I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, oh, psh. Yeah, so I don't know how they're going to recoup that, and we don't know how many Isn't that a coincidence, really?
I mean,
So,
it makes you wonder because you have some places in some states where you have these armed militia who's standing outside of voting polling places and standing outside of polling stations, but yet you don't hear anything about what they are doing to them who are standing out there like that. Yet
mhm,
they're passing legislation to limit the number of voting places, limit the number of absentee boxes, and criminalizing individuals who just want to give out water and food for people waiting in lines for hours and hours on end. But yet
that
people stand
mm.
out there with armed AR-15s.
And that is such a unhumane type thing. We're not going to give you any water or drink, but you can stand out in line for 10 hours, in a place that's far from where you live because you got to make it to the polls, and you don't want to give them any water. I mean, you don't want to give them any snacks, really.
But look at the areas that that's targeting. Once again,
Exactly.
the metro areas. Uh,
Hmm.
it always seems to be something wrong with the polling machines or something. You know,
Hmm.
not having enough election workers and all of that that prolongs the process. So
Right.
it's it's all a setup, in my opinion. But that's for another conversation for another day.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mr. Mathis. You continue to have a blessed day. And
All right,
as always, I would like to leave something behind to get you to think about.
all right,
They may not see us coming to vote, but they will hear us when we get there. So cast your vote. And maybe you want the excitement of the last day to be in the hoorah of that last day of voting. But cast your vote. Your
right.
vote counts. It does
Absolutely.
not count if you don't vote. So stop thinking that if you vote, your vote doesn't count. It does. That
Right.
one number, that one number will make a difference.
Absolutely. And we got to continue to do that in every election, not just one. And if our candidate doesn't win, it doesn't mean the work is over. We have to continue to keep working. We have to continue to keep voting until we get the change that we'd like to see.
Yes, that is it. That's it. That's it. That's the word. That's it. Well, thank you, Mr. Mathis. You can
Thank
continue to have a blessed weekend, and
you.
until the next time,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
thank you. Take care.
You too.